Well, welcome everybody to Rxperience. I'm Chad Wurz, Chief Executive of ASCP, alongside my podcast partner, Tom Hansel of Hansel Health, and we are on location. So This is a really fun treat for us to be at one of our member pharmacies and be speaking to a couple of pillars of our industry in Phil Fogg and Jessica Androff, who is our upcoming president, our current president-elect. So welcome to the podcast, or I guess thank you for welcoming us to your podcast studio.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, this is really fun. One of the things we do on this podcast, and I'm going to direct this toward Phil, is we get the origin story of the people that we have on. So normally that's a pharmacist origin story, but Phil, I want Phil's origin story. How did you get started in this industry, and take us all the way up through where did Consonus Pharmacy start and play a role?
Well, I'll try to make it as brief as I can, but let me just start with, I'm a fourth-generation nursing home administrator. I have two sons that are licensed that are fifth generation, and there's only one other family in America that I'm aware of that can say they have 5 generations.
That's amazing.
It's amazing, and I think it, though, demonstrates some mental health issues in my family. I started with my dad. I worked in our family facility from the time I was 13. And then went to college to get a healthcare administration degree, got a master's, and I was working with Dad as I was doing that. And in 1989, I was doing some due diligence on an acquisition for him, and the board decided not to take advantage of the acquisition. And I said, hey, could I take this facility? And I think that they thought, yeah, he'll go turn it around and then bring it back in. And I just kind of kept going. And it was interesting because it was a family business, and it was really nice to kind of get out of the family dynamics and be on my own. And oddly, 37 years later, we find ourselves back in some family business dynamics, either with my kids or our staff's kids. But along that route, because we began in Oregon, at that time the Medicaid rate was one of the worst in the nation. And so immediately needed to start diversifying just to get some other economic engines to kind of make it. And so we got into home health and home care first, and then diversified into rehab. And along the way, kind of growing the facilities. And then in 2004, the only pharmacy player in our market was Omnicare, and the service level wasn't high, and nobody had an alternative. We had some experience and knowledge on our team in the pharmacy, long-term care pharmacy space. So we decided to start that pharmacy here in Portland, Oregon. And of course, we've grown since that time. But then along the way, the Affordable Care Act has passed. We get into some data analytic businesses, and then we start our provider-owned special needs plan, our Medicare Advantage plan in 2016. With it comes our physician services and advanced practice practitioners who support our members. And then ultimately, we've built all of these services, which were initially a way of diversifying. We've been able to bring them under a population health strategy where we've got the ability to take all of the services that are needed to really support a senior who is actively aging or in aging decline and help them live the best life that they can possibly live. And it's been my real kind of passion of how to do that, because it's complicated, not only in terms of how do you execute on the service side, but how do you build a technology platform that connects all those providers together and kind of removes the dysfunction that is kind of inherent to our healthcare system. So I know that's a long answer. I tried to make it short.
No. That's good. I want you to go back though a little bit and talk about this fourth and fifth generation. Like what was it in the first generation, and what did it evolve to? And then you kind of talked a little bit about what you did in your work and in that generation. But like, what was it like? Like I think ASCP, we're 57 years old. So we started in the late 60s in a response to what I understand was the Social Security Act creating licensed nursing homes.
Right.
And then these licensed nursing homes reaching out to really the community pharmacist and saying, hey, we need help. Like, how do we manage meds here? And the consultant pharmacist of that 1969 ASCP was an independent community pharmacist that was being consulted by that nursing home. And then obviously it's evolved over time, but take us all the way back to that.
Yeah, it's a great question, Chad. So my great-grandmother started what we would think of as board and care homes or foster care homes today. She was probably the equivalent of an LPN in the 50s. And so she had 3 or 4 of these around the Portland area. And then with the passing of the Social Security Act in 1964, all of a sudden there was Medicaid and Medicare funding.
Right.
And so she was one of those original people that built a nursing facility. And it was happened to be in Northeast Portland here. And that started her slowly building about 6 facilities, and different family members took different of the facilities, which is a really common thing that you could see across America. But it's interesting when you ask that question, because so often long-term care pharmacy is expected to demonstrate their value, and yet the way that this profession was spawned was out of need, which is the retail pharmacy environment couldn't fill the needs of this sector, and yet we've been around so long now that people don't know what it would be like without us, and the only way we could ever really show it to them is to walk away, and which of course would never happen. So,
yeah. You know, Phil, when I look at your organization, I don't see a company, I see an ecosystem, right? I mean, you mentioned all the different business lines that you guys are in with hospice and pharmacy and rehab, and you continue to expand that. And I saw your mission statement downstairs says to promote the vitality within our clients and our employees. And you definitely can see that word vitality is eccentric of everything that you guys are doing. Going back to, you talked about growing up in the business. I'm sure as a teenager, you were doing the grunt work. You were mopping the floors and cleaning the dishes and doing all that grunt work. But for you, it went from being a family business to a life calling. Do you remember that moment where you said, I want to dedicate my life to this? Yeah,
I think, again, I started at 13. Every summer I'd work in the facilities. And I gained a kind of a unique and sincere passion for the elderly. And I did that because I got to build so many relationships and see so many people and get the wisdom. And but I also got to see my dad, who was my main mentor, and see how this profession could challenge people's leadership skills and the real talents it took to be effective and really do a good job in this area. I would tell you that you need to have that passion, because the people that don't have it and they're just in it for the money don't survive for very long. They're in and out, or they fail, because inevitably you're going to go through very challenging times. We're at so much risk for reimbursement, regulatory, and all the different challenges that face us, that if you're not really passionately committed to this, you're not going to make it. The only other thing I would say is it was 1998. We were in a strategic planning meeting, and I had a bunch of leaders dealing with challenges like professional liability and workers' comp and workforce shortages, and it kind of got negative. And I said, guys, why do we do what we do? It seems hard. and I kind of knew, but I wanted them to go through the psychological process. And they all kind of slowly got back to because of how we feel when we make a difference in somebody's life. And, we then took that idea, and I would say one of the unique things we do are very intentional about all of our cultural programmings and try and reinforce the meaning and purpose of what we do. And it's frankly easier in environments where people are hands-on caregivers. But I can tie this back to any role within the company, how somebody can make a difference in the lives of the people we serve or our staff. And I would say that pharmacy has a unique challenge, because most of the pharmacy team are within the 4 walls of the pharmacy. But we have to be very intentional about getting them out, getting them into the facilities, exposing them in different ways so that they can see that they are serving a population of people that are fragile, polypharmacy, and the services and how we do what we do can make a huge difference in somebody's life.
And I would say, amongst our leadership team, that passion and commitment to older adults is pervasive, and you can feel it. We actually had, through our foundation, we do a thing called Spirit of 45, where we have biplanes that take veterans up, and we had our first Spirit of 45 in our Omaha market a couple weekends ago. So we had leaders that was their first opportunity to see it. And I got an email from our VP of operations in the Midwest, and it brought me to tears because she went with a team of people, and she said it was like one of those most compelling moments of her entire career because they got to interact with older adults, with the residents that we take care of. Yeah. And her whole team, there were 10 of them there, and the whole team felt that way, which is pretty amazing. We have to, that's one of the ways that pharmacy has to get involved, is we have to go outside of the pharmacy and interact with the residents.
Well, and you can see there's a direct link between that story, those activities, and Phil being a 13-year-old working in a nursing home, talking to all of these older adults and gaining this experience and having these relationships and saying, this is why we're here. Right. We're here to pull that from people or let them express themselves and be healthy and do whatever we can to preserve that.
And I would tell you that, you've gotten to meet some of our team.
Oh, yeah.
If you walk around and you met all of our team tonight, you'll get to see some in another environment. The leaders that we have deep knowledge and experience in this profession. And you won't find, and you'll find nursing home experience in the pharmacy or across all of the different service lines. These are folks that have dedicated their careers to this profession. Unlike sometimes I'll go into other environments and they're just a professional leader, and they came from another sector.
Yeah.
I would tell you here, it's like, you got to know your stuff because there's a lot of people that have a lot of experience and knowledge. But I think the thing I'm most proud of all of them is just how well they work together. And I think it was about 20 years ago, I started to see the value of understanding what our suppliers do, what everybody in the ecosystem does, because if we can understand their challenges, their economics better, then we can be better partners to them. And that I drove through our teams and our diverse entities, where I want all of these leaders to be together. I want them to work together. I want them to understand each other's challenges, what their strategic objectives are, and be trying to figure out how to create value for everybody.
And it seems like that was the inspiration for Consonus, even though you were struggling with your current pharmacy. I think that from what you're saying is that you didn't really have that continuum of care. You felt like you had responsibility for these residents at your facilities, but you couldn't really affect all the other things that were going on that affected those residents. And so you guys have built that, again, ecosystem to make sure that you protect that whole continuum of care.
Yeah, that's very accurate. That's very true. And I think that the ability to understand the customer so well, because we've got such deep history on the skilled and assisted living side, enables us just to be better partners to the facilities as well. I will tell you that, I think every long-term care pharmacy thinks they care and they do a great job. I think they generally do. I know that our team has a fairly unique ability to go, we know what's happening right now, whether it's environmental, flooding or snowstorms or ice storms or somebody's in regulatory challenges, whatever those are. We understand those and know what and how to help them in that period of time.
So as change happens in our industry, we get a little bit of change sometimes, right? But every administrator across America struggles with reimbursement changes. They struggle with regulation changes. They certainly struggled with COVID. And, the pressure in this industry is, I think, second to none. Maybe an air control, traffic control pilot, might have to be a little more pressure. But there's a lot of pressure here. But I look at someone like yourself, you've got 28 healthcare facilities, you're servicing 11 states with Consonus and rehab. And so there's change that has to happen. There's decisions that have to happen. What happened maybe earlier in your life that gave you that confidence to say, I'm going to take this on personally. I'm going to deal with this, or maybe, I guess, not be numb to the weight of that change, knowing that change that I'm going to have to make, that decision is so impactful. And it's easy to fall underneath that pressure. How do you handle that?
Yeah, that is just a really great question, and I'll answer it, and I'll just say that one of the things I learned very early is you can either ignore the problems or you can be a part of the solution. And we as an organization have chosen to be on the front lines of trying to figure out how to deal with all of those strategic threats, all of the driving forces that we're facing. And that generally means that within each organization, we have a leader or leaders who are actively involved with the professional trade association for that sector. And I mean, across our businesses, each leader has usually been the board chair. We've got incoming or current, and so they're all actively engaged, and it enables us. Sometimes I feel like it's to your point. Now we know all the things and the risks, and it's like maybe it's a little tougher to sleep at night. On the other hand, I'd rather be a part of how do you really create strategies that are going to affect these threats or these driving forces that are happening. And right now, to your point, there are more, I think, than I've ever seen. And it's unfortunate that it's at the very time that we're going through this demographic tsunami of the boomers, where we need to be on our A game right at the time that COVID weakened everybody. We've seen massive consolidation and sell-offs in the facility environment, which hasn't always been for the good. And and you've got workforce and all these different challenges happening. And but like I said, I guess it just helps me sleep at night to be engaged and a part of solutions than it does to be ignoring it, which many people do. Yeah. And it doesn't matter whether it's in the long-term care pharmacy space or in the nursing facility space. For a lot of people, it's just easier to put their head in the sand. I don't mind that sometimes, as long as they give money to the political process.
And I think, we talk about this a lot at ASCP is, that involvement of the provider is actually really critical to the messaging. And so we do need, on the ACA side, you need nursing home administrators to go to the Hill and be able to have the conversation. You need pharmacists to be able to go to the Hill and have the conversation to be able to impact and influence change. And we've seen where that can be effective when we're, there in mass and we have the same messaging.
I'm an instructor. I just do like 3 classes on the politics of healthcare. And it sometimes I think the kids think that I'm kind of a DC, sleazeball. Sorry, guys. But we all know that if you want to be an advocate for long-term care pharmacy and for the people we serve, you've got to be effective on the Hill, because everything that could kill us happens out of DC. And all of our Part D funding is through the Hill, and all of the regulatory threats that we might face is through the Hill. And if you are not as strong as you could possibly be there, you are threatening your sector. And the ability to have quality voices like you guys, the quality policy to advocate for, and then the dollars to get the access to the politicians. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but if there was one thing I could say to people is, if you're not going to be involved with your time or your voice, at least give the money, so that the people that will, allocate that time and be kind of champions for the profession have your support.
Yeah, I think like when I think about some of the things you both have said, the leadership and the culture component is also palatable. Like, at ASCP, at least in my experience, Terry Fagan came in and was a board member. Jessica then came in. Carrie McClary came in. Beth Biggs came in on the policy side. And you're creating. There had to be a point in your career where you're like, we're really good at nursing homes, but we have to now look in these other sectors, and just like you do with pharmacy, and say, we're not really just good at nursing homes. We're really good at leadership. And if we apply that same culture and leadership to a pharmacy, then we're going to be really good at that. And if we do it to an ISNP, then we're going to be really good at that. And then and maybe it was along the same time, you're like, we have to push these people out because these are policy changers. And if they're in leadership positions at national levels, they can influence policy. They can help push people to the Hill. they can be on the right side of the policy. And it's just very pervasive that's what you guys have put together throughout Marquee and Consonus and all your organizations. And I think it's really important because you said it earlier, if you're in this for the money, it's very transparent. You can see it. Even Congress, and they're in it for the money, I think. They can see it. And if you don't bring people that actually are passionate, understand it, and can tell you stories about how it's working or not working, then you're not going to really move things.
Right.
So it's definitely a point well taken.
Well, you're taking a responsibility outside your own personal backyard and outside of Consonus and taking responsibility for the voice and the help of the nation. If you're a nursing home operator, you have a handful or, good regional, do you believe that with the changes happening with them, all the different dynamics we've talked about, if they're going to be able to continue to be relevant 10, 15 years from now, if they haven't created their own ecosystem, they haven't diversified revenue streams, because reimbursement, as far as I know, is not going to get any better. Regulation changes are not going to stop happening. Mm-hmm. And, we always seem to be one step ahead of CMS because their changes take so long to make, but it's still kind of a never-ending up and down. So if you're talking to a young Phil Fogg that owns a handful of healthcare centers, are you recommending that they start growing their own ecosystem, creating more diversity as far as revenue opportunities?
Well, what I would tell you is it takes a certain scale to be able to develop the capabilities to really do population health effectively. And when I talk about population health, what I really am talking about is the ability to manage lives, and the common thing is the payer. So one of our populations is all of our Medicare Advantage Special Needs Plan members. Another is our MSSP, our Medicare Shared Savings Program members. It'll be the new CMMI LEADS program. And then after that, where I really want to get to is the Medicare Advantage just contracting directly for their populations in long-term care, and say, we'll be the PCP, we'll manage this, and we will take a share of the savings on the MLR. And we can do it better, is the point. But to do that requires a clinical team with a model of care to support them, that technology platform, all these things that you've got to really invest in. So not everybody could do it, is the answer. But I do think that there will be opportunities, whether it's through us or other people, that somebody can provide those services to them. I think that the future scenario in terms of, are we going to be we call it the optimal or the minimal world, is we're going to continue to see workforce shortages. I mean, just the demographics of the number of boomers and how many people there are to support them. It's going to be there, and the question's going to be, and then that workforce shortage issue is going to cause inflation, and then whether we have a great future or not is going to depend on whether the government says we're going to fund the cost of the inflation effectively. So if Medicare and Medicaid do that, then I think the world will be good for the nursing facility environment and the people that service them. If they didn't, it could be rougher. And so time will tell. We'll see. I personally am optimistic because I think that the government always reacts when there's access issues. And so if they can't get people out of the hospital into post-acute, there's not long-term care beds or rooms in assisted living, they're going to react with payment. And so, I am optimistic, but I just think it's going to be a bumpy ride over the next 5 years.
And you're seeing that to a certain extent with the rural health transformation funds. There's this recognition that access issues in rural are challenging today, and they're going to continue to be challenging in the future. And so they're trying to figure out, how do we problem solve around that? In an ideal state, they problem solve around that, and it creates, a roadmap for how do we do this more broadly and deal with the access issues that we know are going to exist in skilled nursing as this population continues to just boom.
Rural healthcare is, I think they are starting to think about it, but I think it's at risk. If we don't do something fairly quickly, it doesn't matter what state or region of America you're starting to see, when the hospital leaves, when the skilled facility can't get the staff to be able to meet the minimum staffing requirements and it closes down,
Right.
And you don't have those services. People now need to go to an urban area or to a larger community. And we see it in Oregon. I've seen it in Iowa, and I've seen it in Nebraska. And it's just it's a real issue.
That's why we're pushing for provider status of some sort through retail pharmacies and those community pharmacies out there, rural pharmacies.
Yeah.
Provider status, getting some waiver on some of the staffing requirements, enabling special needs plans to support smaller communities, and changing the economics so that it can work for them, so that people can get primary care in their older age years. There's a lot of things. I mean, I think there's some things that can be done, but sometimes it's just not the priority until, the issue, you guys know this, but until the issue's slapping somebody in the face.
Right. Well, I have a question for each of you. I'll start with Jessica. Talk about when you joined Consonus and all of that. Like, what did you see in this opportunity? What did you see in Phil and Marquis and the company?
Yeah, so I had worked for a family-owned company for a number of years, and they had sold to Omnicare, and had to do a stint at Omnicare as a result. And I had been friends with the Consonus leadership team and our past president, Neil Marshall, Terry Ferreira on the team for many years in the industry. We would get together at industry conferences and we would share best practice. And we actually had a monthly call where we were on the same software system. We talked about how do we, optimize our technology. And Neil called me and said, I'm looking for a vice president of operations. And obviously I was intrigued because these were people that I respected and I was friends with. And I tell the story from moment one when I came into Marquis and Consonus and got my tour. I was very, very close to my grandparents growing up. And I always said they lived, like at the end of their life, they lived the best and the best rest of their lives. And when I interviewed, it was on some art that we had in the conference room, and it said, helping seniors live the best rest of their lives.
Oh, wow.
And so it was just kind of like, wow, this is where I'm supposed to be.
The word vitality coming out again.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I think once you're here, you feel like you're feeling it, just in meeting with our teams, you definitely feel it. And I mean, the leadership comes, certainly Phil has certain expectations as a leader, and we hire people that have similar expectations as leaders. But I think what also is really unique about it is that we're not just leaders, we're friends. And I think that really is what makes people want to stay, is because people, like in the worst of days, and we have bad days in senior care, these leaders have your back. And you can sit and commiserate together, and you can solve problems together.
Yeah.
And you know that you're going to get through it because you've got this group of people that's all committed to the same outcome. And so I think, that's what brought me here, and that's why I stay.
All right, that's awesome and a great segue. You're making me look like a good podcast moderator here. But the segue to Phil's question is, Phil, your great-grandmother started this. You're doing it. Your sons are doing it. Your kids are doing it. Like, what do you feel like you are doing what she would have been doing? Obviously, so much more sophisticated today than probably it was in the 50s. But are you living that philosophy? Is that where it comes from? Is it somewhat in your DNA to want to deliver for the older adults that you're caring for? I mean, is that?
Yeah, I think there's certainly an element of that where, grow up with leadership and family leaders who show a huge amount of respect for that population, for seniors, and treat them with the respect they deserve, have a passion for them and the quality of the services that you're providing. That is certainly there. But as you said, you were talking, I was like, my great-grandmother could have never envisioned the world we're in today.
Oh, sure,
my grandparents could have never envisioned the world we're in today. And my dad, who's sharp as a tack and very healthy, could, he was out before all of these changes occurred. But they each had their challenges that they had to go through in their own periods of time. But the scale and the scope of what we're dealing with today are, I think, beyond any. I mean, I remember I used to go to, association board meetings with my dad in the 70s. Mm-hmm. And, they might have one issue, that they're dealing with.
Yeah.
And now it's like, we got 10,
Yeah.
and they're all important.
Yeah.
And it's just, so the environment is definitely more complex, and things move so much faster, threats, opportunities, everything just is, the speed is really fast.
I think especially in pharmacy, we talk about this, Phil and I talk about this all the time, is there are so many challenges right now that are really outside of our control. Like there are things that we would love to be able to control, but it's getting Congress to take action is how we control it. And so it is a very difficult environment to be in.
I think this thing that's probably the same, though, is that if my great-grandmother or my grandparents or my dad had ever seen somebody on our team treating a staff person or a resident disrespectfully, they would have been gone.
Yeah.
Their tolerance level for that was nothing. And so if that part, I think I would say, is definitely in my DNA. And in my son's DNA, and how they make choices to treat people and how to get through bad times and all those things are probably in the DNA. But yeah, now some of the strategic stuff, there was no way.
So Jess, I'm sure that every congressman and senator is going to be watching this podcast. So look into the camera. What do they need to know when it comes to really about protecting our seniors? Like, what are the one or two things that you think that they probably don't know, or maybe they have some awareness of, outside of the typical talking points that is kind of out there? But what would your statement to them be?
Yeah, I mean, I think we continue to have to drive home the access issues that Phil talked about. I mean, we're going to have access issues regardless. And they can either be reactionary about those access issues, or we can be planful ahead of time. It's probably no surprise to you, we're very planful at Marquis and Consonus. And we spend a lot of time kind of trying to future-proof what's happening. And I think Congress needs to get better at future-proofing, right? Like, the numbers are there. There's zero argument that these people are going to need care, and there's zero argument that we don't have the ability to scale the care that we are providing today because of the reimbursement. And so they have a choice.
Yeah, and I would just tag onto that you've got this aging population of skilled physical plants, nursing facility physical plants, and and you've had all of these acquisitions take place where they've paid top dollar for all of this old capacity. Some of it's not terribly old, but 60% of it is. And it's at the very moment that you're going to see this demographic pressure start to emerge. And I don't see CMS saying they're not going to go out like in 64 and say we're going to fund a bunch of new nursing facilities,
Right.
or hospitals.
No, they're not.
They're just not going to do it. Now, what they will do is to say we'll let the assisted living market consume this demographic pressure. And that means I think you're going to see, that's one of the reasons Oregon's always interesting, is we were the first waiver state for the assisted living, which occurred in 1981, where Medicaid dollars were enabled to go away from the SNFs to the assisted living environment. And you see this dramatic transition of this population into community-based care assisted living programs. And what it does, though, is raises costs, and it lowers the occupancies in the SNFs. Those costs go up, so you got to be prepared for some of that. But what we know is that there's 14,500 to 15,000 SNFs in America, and I think there's 45,000 ALFs today. Well, we're probably going to need another 15 to 20,000 ALFs out there, in the world.
For sure.
And I say all of that because, from a long-term care pharmacy perspective, if I was talking to the Hill, it's like, we are getting abused on our payments from the PBMs on the assisted living side. The service is the exact same. The costs are the same. In fact, we could argue that the costs are higher. Make those PBMs pay the same rates that they're paying for the SNF side.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it also lends itself to community living at home too.
Yeah,
there are people living at home that need the services that are provided in a SNF from a pharmacy perspective, and to some degree from a care perspective. How do you create access for that?
A great example of that was my own mother. She got Lewy body dementia, and she passed a couple of years ago, but the complexity of her medication management.
Yeah.
And by the way, she was a woman that would always tell any new person she met, if she had met you, Chad, she would have gone, Oh, and by the way, I'm KFOG and I'm on no medications. She was so proud of that. And of course, then when she gets her, which is probably why she got so sensitive to medications, when she got Lewy body dementia, suddenly she's polypharmacy. And to rely on the group practice physician who was doing her best with all of the intricacies of this, it didn't work.
Right.
And she needed the long-term care pharmacy model to really support her. Yeah. And medication management didn't get really good until she actually went into one of our nursing facilities.
Right.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because that is one thing that I think we have to do a better job at in how we talk to policymakers, how we talk about long-term care pharmacy services, is that when you're in a nursing home, you have a nurse administering meds, you have one pharmacy generally, you have one prescriber, and you have a consultant pharmacist. You are position A for med management. Your meds are packaged. We have 100% compliance and adherence, or at least we could argue pretty close.
Yeah.
When you step outside of that nursing home into assisted living, a lot of those things, unless you're in a state with waivers that can support those services, you're stepping away from that. And I think every consultant pharmacist, every long-term care pharmacist would say, what do you think's better, a nursing home patient's med management or assisted living? And they would say, oh my gosh, nursing home, like assisted living's chaos. And take it a step further out in the community, multiple prescribers, multiple pharmacies, you have no real control.
Yeah, no
and
adherence.
If we don't apply those services, if we don't talk about that, nursing homes get such a bad rap as being terrible places, but med management, they're better than everybody else. And we got to talk about that. Because that person at home, your mom with Lewy body dementia, needs that service that they can't get. And even when we're talking very recently, it's, why does a beneficiary in a nursing home get a consultant pharmacist and get their meds but at home they can't? Like that's a problem with Medicare and Medicaid, is that they don't have the same level of service for somebody that needs it.
It's a gap in the system.
And when you talk about, we talk about population health, like really, like how do we get the best outcomes? You could argue in skilled nursing, those people probably have the best blood sugar control. They've got the best blood pressure control. They've got the least number of falls, because they have this whole interdisciplinary team that is really, really focused on good outcomes. And in assisted living, they're just not staffed adequately. They don't have that robust interdisciplinary team. We've talked about some states require a consultant pharmacist and some states don't. And there's different frequencies at which you have to have a pharmacist and different requirements, because it's not, there's not a SOM where you have certain requirements that you need to check the box on. So it's kind of the wild, wild west. And I think, that's the direction that ultimately it'll probably go as we start looking at 15,000 more assisted living to fill that need. There's going to have to be some additional consultant pharmacist regulation that is happening in that population, and other interdisciplinary team members that are contributing to success in those environments. And, that's better for the whole system. But it's really, really hard for Congress to see that. And the way that they've privatized, the healthcare system, even though it's a government-funded program, they've privatized it through, these big, Fortune 5 conglomerates.
Yeah.
A lot of that gets lost.
For sure.
And I'll put something into your guys' radar. Maybe it's already there, but we had our annual board meeting for our Medicare Advantage Special Needs Plan yesterday, and we were going over our HEDIS scoring. Well, the HEDIS scoring for if somebody's in a long-term care facility is not relevant.
Right.
And there's I won't bore you too far, but there's factors with how the drugs are billed.
Yeah.
And then how they're measuring our fulfillment percentage and adherence percentages.
Right.
There's factors that have to change when you're talking about the population that we serve that they don't understand. But the medication therapy management requirement, I think all of us are aware of that issue, which is a complete joke.
Yeah.
They use these third-party medication therapy management groups that basically audit 20% of the the plan population, and then they come back with these recommendations for the pharmacy to take action on, or the physicians who are managing the member population. And it's a joke when we have our pharmacists doing MTM consistently throughout that person's life there, I've always been a fan from the get-go of pharmacists getting provider status. I mean, it's just been something I've always supported. And I don't know if it takes them getting provider status to get this to happen. But I think that just getting control of that MTM money and putting it into the long-term care pharmacy, whether it's through, like a provider, a bill from a pharmacist, or if it's just a payment to the pharmacy, we've got to figure that out because we're doing it and we're not taking credit for it.
Mm-hmm. Right. 100%.
We're famous for that.
Yes. I mean, that sounds like pharmacy from the beginning.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Vital Life Foundation. So we're not just here to do the podcast, but we're also here to celebrate with you guys. And from me doing a little bit of background, I mean, you guys have raised millions and millions of dollars through Vital Life. And I know it's something that you're very, very proud of. I saw something where actually 40% of your own employees contribute to Vital Life. I think just employees alone have raised close to $1 million for this foundation. So I know that impact is there, and that continues to grow. You continue to have record-setting years with growth on that on the contributions. So when you're sitting there tonight, Phil, what emotions, what thoughts are going to come to your mind? Because I know this is kind of the epicenter of the year for you, and this is kind of a reflection of everything that you've built. And so, what's going to be happening upstairs in your head today?
Yeah. Well, number one, thanks for being here, guys. You're gonna.
Absolutely.
And by the way, several of our pharmacy peers have been here in the past and support us still. Sam Mafus, and we get a lot of support from the peers. This takes a lot of energy in our team. We started our foundation for a couple of reasons. One is, like many organizations, we were giving indiscriminately to all these different asks that we were getting, and it was like, okay, we got to consolidate this. But really what we were trying to do is to give our dollars in a way that created meaning and purpose for our residents and our staff. So we have a number of charitable categories, but one of them is just we have our primary charitable partners. It's 5 organizations. It's people like Ronald McDonald House, Meals on Wheels. But it's organizations that will embrace our population that we serve to enable them to go make a difference in the lives of the people that the charity's serving. Mm-hmm. And that, like at Ronald McDonald House, that can be them sewing blankets. It could be baking cookies. Meals on Wheels, it could be doing their name placards and inspirational thoughts. But they just have to do something for us. So we're not the typical charity where you just hand them a check. Mm-hmm. The groups that just wanted a check don't get that. And then we also have chronic diseases and things related to senior aging that we will support, because we feel like that's important. And then we have other programs. Jess mentioned the Journey of Heroes and the Spirit of 45, where we partner with another group who does all these flights for our residents. But it's all about making a difference in people's life and specifically seniors and the staff that support seniors. It's been a great thing. It takes a big effort. By the way, tonight's probably more about having fun and raising money. Mm-hmm. The real fun is when you get to go to the events, when you get to see the faces of the people. And as Jess said, we just had this our VP of Ops in the Midwest that got to participate in a Spirit of 45 for the first time, and it was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And it kind of goes back to that 1998 meeting that I talked about, that I want to give leaders and people the ability to take a moment and just enjoy who we serve and what we do, instead of the IRA challenges and the crap we have to deal with on a day in and day out basis. Yeah.
Well, we're looking forward to it. I think it'll be awesome.
Yeah.
It'll be great. Well, thank you so much for this. Thank you for lending us a studio and letting us come out here and do our podcast. Appreciate it. And thank you for what you do for older adults and what you do for pharmacy. We appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been great.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next time on Rxperience.